Are you without Chris Godwin, DK Metcalf, or maybe you just lost Calvin Ridley or Henry Ruggs? Who are you going to start at the wide receiver position? Fear not, we have brought in the original start-sit guru, Sports Illustrated's senior fantasy analyst, Michael Fabiano. Fabs, it's a tough week at the wide receiver position, but I see you are starting one of my favorite guys. I love that he makes this list every week, and I'm going to start him too. Let everybody know who our stud is.
Yeah, Brandon Cooks. Last week had a good game in garbage time, but you know what? We'll take that in fantasy football, right? But the matchup is really good this week against the Miami Dolphins. They've allowed the second most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, and receivers lined out wide have scored 8 touchdowns against them. So this could also be a negative game script situation where the Texans are throwing the ball in the second half. Miami's defense is not that good, so I would start Brandon Cooks. And speaking of the Dolphins, boy, DeVante Parker came back and looked really good last week. 11 targets, 8 catches, 16.5 fantasy points against the Bills. I mean, that's a really good defense. Now he's got the Texans, right? Their defense has not been good. Let's put it that way. In fact, no team in the National Football League has a lot of more fantasy points per game to receivers lined out wide than Houston. So DeVante Parker is in a smash spot this week.
Yeah, and amazingly, DeVanta Parker available in 65% of fantasy leagues. So if you guys are looking for someone to pick up, go get Parker. And you're also comfortable starting Emmanuel Sanders after he laid an egg last week. I totally agree. Go back to the well with Emmanuel Sanders versus the Jags. But there's a few wide receivers you're sitting, a rookie and a veteran that seems to keep making this list.
Right. And again, 4 teams on a bye, folks. So, some of these guys you're going to have to play. Just beware. And that's Devontae Smith. And I love the talent. He's been so inconsistent lately, though. Really tough. Had a bad game last week. And now you got the Chargers. They've allowed 3 touchdowns and the fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. And LA has actually given up the second fewest points per game to receivers lined out wide, which is bad news for Devontae Smith. And then, Allen Robinson, I keep going back to him. And until he does something, he will remain on the sit-em list. Folks, he's had one game, with double-digit points. Last week, Justin Fields had his best game as a pro. Guess what Allen Robinson did? Bupkis, all right? And I would keep him on the sidelines this week against the Steelers. They've allowed just 4 touchdowns and an average of 21.1 fantasy points per game to receivers lined out wide. So this is not a great matchup for Robinson. Until he shows some signs of statistical life, he needs to be on your bench or on the waiver wire.
I think we get bonus points at Sports Illustrated if we're able to work Bupkis into any video. So points for you.
One of my favorite words.
You're also sitting Kadarius Toney, and that is spicy, and I love it. If you want to know all of Fab's start-sit recommendations for this week, tough week with 4 teams on a bye, find us at si.com/fantasy.